Hi everybody, it's Patrice here, and this is the latest instalment of the newly named T is for Tangents series. As you'd all be very acutely aware, here at the A is for Alien podcast, we are very much still in the beta stage and sorting everything out. So, this is kind of a bit of a test. I don't even know if I'm going to eventually upload it, because I'm trying to see how long it takes for me to make one of these episodes. The time is 11:30 American Eastern Standard Time, and the challenge I've set for myself is to see if I can continue with my promised Monday uploads. So I already released the Bigfoot tangent story a little bit earlier, and that was originally going to be for Monday, but I wanted to also do one which was on theme with the episode that I did last week, which was A was for alien abductions. And I did Travis Walton in the main series, and I didn't really want to do the Betty and Barney Hill story because I feel like that is probably deserving of an entire main series episode because of how complex it is and how long it kind of goes for. So instead, I thought it would be kind of fun if I told you the sordid tale of Antonio Villas-Boas. And yeah, it's a little bit saucy. And you know, when you think about the time when he was talking about this, you know, I guess it's even saucy for that time. Like really saucy for 1957. So Betty and Barney Hill were abducted in 1961, and Antonio claims that he was abducted in 1957. So he pipped them to the post by 4 years. And this story has garnered a lot of criticism and a lot of attention over the years. There's a few twists and turns that basically the whole validity of the story were based on, but I don't know, I'll let you be the judge and see what you think. So in 1957, Antonio was 23 years old, and he was working as a farmer near the municipality of Vasallo, Francisco de Sales. I probably absolutely butchered that, so yeah, I'm really sorry if I have offended your mother tongue. He was ploughing fields in the night time to keep away from the summer heat when he noticed what he described as a red star in the night sky. And according to him, this star approached him. It grew in size until he could clearly see that it was shaped like an egg. You know, like you think that that's kind of an odd shape, but in modern times, especially when we're thinking about like the Tic Tac UFO video, like that could have potentially have been described as an egg-shaped UFO by somebody. You know, I often wonder when they say egg-shaped UFO, if they mean like kind of smaller on top and bigger down the bottom, or if it is just like a tablet looking thing. You know, and the Lonnie Zamora case is another really famous egg-shaped UFO encounter, and he was a police officer. So that kind of made people believe that he, of all people, should be telling the truth about those things. And his sighting was in 1964, so it wasn't really that long after. So Antonio's seen this egg kind of come towards him, descend in the field, and 3 little legs, landing gear, I guess, like kind of came out of it, and he freaked out. So he decided to run. So he originally tried to get away in his tractor, but then all the lights died in it. So all of the energy got zapped out of the tractor. So then he jumped out of the tractor and ran away on foot. As he was trying to run away, he got grabbed by a 1.5 meter being. So apparently this being was wearing overalls and a helmet, but it had eyes that he said were small and blue, and instead of like talking, it made barking noises. Then another 3 other beings joined him, and they dragged him inside of the craft. So this obviously differs from modern UFO encounters, because you very rarely hear now of people saying that they were basically manhandled by aliens into a spaceship. So he was lucid throughout this whole process, and he says that when he was in the craft that they made him take off all his clothes, and then he got covered in head to toe with a strange gel. Then he got led into a little semicircle room, and he said that the room had these red symbols written over it. There was nothing really remarkable about those symbols, in my opinion, because when I had a look at them, they just kind of look like, I don't know, a series of ticks and little dashes. So in this new little room, they took samples of his blood, weirdly from his chin, and then he was taken into another room and was just kind of left in there for about an hour. And he said that there was gas pumped into the room that made him really sick. So this is where it gets a little bit sexy. So apparently at this point he was joined by somebody else, another humanoid, except for this one was female, very attractive and very naked. But I think the big giveaway that there was something about this humanoid which made her not really very human was the fact that she was 1.5 meters tall. I mean, that's not much shorter than me, but the most interesting and most hilarious part of this story, though, is the detail that apparently she had bright red pubic hair and underarm hair. She wasn't a redhead, though. She had platinum blonde hair. Damn these modern beauty standards. I reckon if you had fluorescent red pubes and underarm hair, you'd have to grow them. People would want to see it. So Antonio said that he was incredibly attracted to this bright redded pubed woman. And weirdly, she didn't kiss him, but instead would nip him on the chin. And I think that's a weird detail because that's where they took blood from him as well. So if this is a real encounter, I wonder what the chin means to them or what they think the chin means. So eventually they ended up having sexual intercourse. And after the deed was done, she rubbed her belly and gestured upwards. And Boas was like, oh, so that means that you're going to raise our child in space. Things are moving a bit quick. Another detail that he put in the story, which I think as a woman adds to the validity of this story, is that he says that she seemed relieved that the task was over. And isn't that relatable? And also, as a man, why would you put that detail in the story if you were making it up? Wouldn't you just be telling everybody that it was the best she ever had and you're just the complete man? Why would you say, oh yeah, she was a bit underwhelmed, I guess? You had sex with an alien, and then you go back and tell all your friends and the world that it was obvious that she'd had better. That makes zero sense to me. He somewhat recovers though, because he does then protect his ego by saying that it became clear that, he was just used as a good stallion. So after all this went down, he was able to put his clothes back on, and then he was given a tour of the ship by the aliens, which they said went for about an hour or so. And he tried to steal something which looked like a clock, but he was caught and they stopped him from doing so. And then he was escorted off the ship and he watched it as it took off. He returned home and he realized that he'd missed 4 hours of his life. So after this event, he started to feel a little bit sick. He was getting nauseous and he was weakness as well as headaches and lesions, and you really don't want to be waking up with lesions after a night with an alien. I think that they call those CTDs, celestially transmitted diseases. Boom tish. Instead of going to a doctor like a normal person, he just persisted with these ailments until he contacted a journalist called Jose Martins, who had put an ad in the newspaper looking for people who had experiences with UFOs. And then that was when Martins contacted Dr. Alvaro Fontes, who belonged to the School of Medicine in Brazil, to, examine him. But the problem was that that doctor was also part of APRO. And so this is the thing, and the problem that I have also with hypnotherapists who specialize in alien abductees is that if you're going to a doctor that specializes or has an interest in alien and UFO abductions, and you've been referred to him by somebody who thinks that you've been abducted by UFOs, that must skew their bias in some way. Even though they've all taken the Hippocratic Oath and they've claimed to first do no harm, you can't tell me that in that capacity, in the twilight of personal and professional interest, that they aren't slightly skewed by their alien-coloured glasses. Needless to say, he examined the farmer and decided that he had been indeed exposed to some kind of radiation. The description of his wounds are kind of gross. Small reddish nodules that were painful when touched, each with a central orifice yielding a yellowish thin watery discharge. Ugh. The skin surrounding the wounds presented a hyperchromatic violet tinged area. That sounds like some kind of crazy wound that I would have created in makeup school. Alright, so the UFO community in Brazil were loving this story. It was making the rounds in UFO periodicals. Apparently the earliest though was 1962, which is interesting because that's the year after the Betty and Barney Hill abduction case. Another really interesting detail about this case, which is different from Betty and Barney Hill and different from Travis Walton, was that Antonio could remember all of this without hypnotic regression. Okay, so the reason that this story is famous and was considered credible was because of perceived social prejudice against Antonio. As I mentioned earlier in the story, he was a farmer, a young farmer. And a lot of people just thought a poor farmer wouldn't be able to make up a story like this. It must be true. Where would he learn of such things such as spacecrafts and alien men? Like, he must be illiterate. He can't read. As skeptics pointed out that only a couple of months before, in the 1957 issue of O Cruzeiro, which was a Brazilian periodical magazine that was extraordinarily popular with the middle class in the 1950s. There had been a story of alien abduction that was incredibly similar to the story that Antonio Villas-Boas recounted. Critics also point out that there was lots of similarities with the accounts that George Adamski would tell. He was the guy that took heaps of photos in the 1940s and 50s that he said were alien spacecraft and claimed to be a contactee with Nordic-looking aliens that would take him to the moon and take him all around the show and show him around their spaceship. But the problem believing that Antonio's account had any kind of credibility due to the fact that he was too poor and illiterate to have made up a story like that was the fact that he was actually not poor and illiterate at all. In fact, he studied law, actually, got married, had 4 children, and studied law until he died in 1991. The fact that he was also wealthy enough to own a tractor should have been a hint as well that maybe he wasn't, shy of a bit of coin. When this information came to light, it was kind of funny because the believers changed their stance and turned around and said, well, he's far too bourgeoisie to make up a story like this. It would damage his career. Why would he lie about that? And that's the other thing. He maintained this story up until he died, so he never revoked his claims. So what do you think? Did Antonio really get abducted by sexy EBEs? Or was he just a 23-year-old making up a load of shit with a bit of a sexy story so that he could have a laugh about it with his friends? Personally, I think that this time in modern history, and especially in modern ufology, was just rife with people creating hoaxes so they could get into their local tabloid paper and have a bit of a laugh about it. Alright, well that's about it for this installment of T is for Tangent and the story of Antonio Villas-Boas and his abduction experience in Brazil in 1957. If I left anything out, please remember to comment it down below because, I love hearing what you guys have to say too, and if you have any insight that I might have missed, I'm not above you calling me out on any bullshit because sometimes I need that. Alright, so that's it for me. Okay guys, I'll speak to you next week. Bye bye.